The chill of the urban dawn always found Arthur Hayes first, seeping into the worn fabric of his military-issue jacket, then through to his bones. He knew the precise moment the city truly woke, not by the gentle sigh of the wind or the first tentative birdsong, but by the escalating roar of traffic on the distant expressway, a mechanical awakening that drowned out the last vestiges of night's quiet promise. He was already awake, as he always was, positioned on his chosen concrete bench, its unforgiving surface a familiar ache against his back. This bench, nestled discreetly yet strategically near the imposing granite facade of the First National Bank, had become his reluctant kingdom, a perch from which he observed the relentless march of a world that largely pretended he didn't exist. His sign, meticulously printed on a piece of scavenged cardboard, rested against his knees. Veteran. Hungry. God bless. It wasn't a plea. Not really. More of a statement, a quiet declaration of his current state, devoid of the aggressive desperation he sometimes saw in the eyes of others like him. His hand, calloused and lined, clutched a battered plastic cup, a relic of a forgotten coffee shop. He held it out, not with a demanding gesture, but with a slight, almost imperceptible tremor, a testament to the constant, dull ache of hunger that resided deep within his gut. It wasn't the sharp, agonizing pain of starvation, but a persistent, gnawing emptiness, a constant reminder of his precarious existence. It was a hunger that had long since transcended the physical, seeping into his very soul, leaching away at his sense of self. The bank itself was a fortress of polished marble and tinted glass, its massive bronze doors revolving ceaselessly, swallowing and regurgitating a stream of impeccably dressed men and women. They moved with a hurried purpose, briefcases swinging, phones pressed to ears, their faces set in expressions of focused determination. Arthur watched them, a silent, unblinking observer. He saw the fleeting glimpses of expensive watches, the gleam of polished shoes, the crisp edges of tailored suits. He knew, with an almost scientific precision, how most would react. The subtle shift in their gait, the averted gaze, the quickening of pace as they navigated around his solitary figure. He was a ghost in their peripheral vision, a momentary blur of inconvenience. They did not see the man, Arthur Hayes. They saw an obstacle, a problem to be circumvented. He was the invisible man, a silent testament to their privilege and his own profound isolation. His uniform, a faded and mended military jacket, was his only possession of real value, a threadbare testament to a life long past. He kept it meticulously clean, brushing off dust, carefully folding it each night. It was his last shred of dignity, a silent refusal to fully succumb to the squalor that often accompanied homelessness. His face, etched with lines that spoke of more than just age, was clean-shaven, his short-cropped hair neatly combed with fingers. He believed in maintaining appearances, even when there was no one left to impress. The mid-morning rush swelled to its peak. A well-dressed woman, her arms laden with shopping bags, walked by, her eyes fixed determinedly ahead. A young man in a sharp suit, animatedly discussing market trends on his Bluetooth headset, swerved slightly to avoid him. Art felt the familiar pang, not of anger, but of a quiet, weary resignation. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting out a slow breath. He'd seen worse, endured worse. This was simply another day on the long, unforgiving road. Suddenly, a slight disturbance in the predictable rhythm of passers-by drew his attention. An elderly woman, her hands trembling slightly, struggled with a bulging grocery bag that threatened to tear open. A ripe apple rolled precariously to the edge, then tumbled to the sidewalk, bouncing once before coming to rest near Art's worn boots. The woman gasped, her frail fingers fumbling. Without a moment's hesitation, Arthur straightened his back, a flicker of forgotten purpose in his tired eyes. He reached down, his movement surprisingly fluid, and retrieved the apple. He rose, extending it to her, his gaze steady and kind. "Here you go, ma'am," he said, his voice a low rumble, rough from disuse but gentle. The woman looked at him, her eyes wide with surprise, then relief. "Oh, thank you, young man. Thank you so much. You're a godsend." She fumbled in her purse, pulling out a crumpled dollar bill. "Please, take this." Art shook his head, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching his lips. "No need, ma'am. Just glad to help." He held her gaze for a moment longer, a silent exchange of shared humanity, before she nodded gratefully and hurried on, clutching her bag. He watched her disappear into the crowd, then settled back onto his bench. The small act of kindness, a fleeting warmth in the usual chill of his day. It was a minuscule act, a drop in the ocean of his hardship, yet it momentarily reaffirmed a part of him that the streets tried to erase. He was not just a beggar. He was still Arthur Hayes, capable of dignity, capable of compassion. This was his save the cat moment, a quiet defiance against the dehumanizing force of his circumstances. As he watched the stream of faces, his eyes, though often weary, sometimes held a peculiar analytical glint. He observed the security cameras mounted on the bank's exterior, noting their blind spots, their angles of coverage. He watched the subtle shifts in the bank guards' routines, the changing of shifts, the casual patterns of their patrols. These were observations born not of malice, but of a deeply ingrained situational awareness, a habit from a life he could barely recall. Sometimes, a complex, almost haunting classical melody would hum, unbidden, in his mind, a fragment of a symphony, a cello concerto. He'd never known why or where he'd learned it, but it was there, a ghost of a cultured past. And occasionally, when he unconsciously rubbed the faded, jagged scar just above his right temple, his mind would flicker with a chaotic montage of muffled shouts, flashing lights, and the distant thud of an explosion. But the memories were like smoke, dissolving before he could grasp them, leaving him with only a lingering sense of unease. He was an enigma even to himself. His gaze drifted to a sleek black sedan pulling up to the curb, its tinted windows reflecting the morning light. A man in an expensive suit, his face etched with the lines of perpetual busyness, emerged from the driver's side. Mr. Vance. Art recognized him. He was a fixture, a senior executive who seemed to live and breathe the bank's corporate air. He moved with an impatient energy, constantly checking his watch. From the passenger side, a small figure emerged. A girl. She was no older than 8, with bright, curious eyes and a mop of unruly brown hair tied back with a colorful ribbon. Amelia Vance. Art knew her too. She often accompanied her father on his rare late starts, a tiny splash of color in the monochrome world of the bank's entrance. Unlike the adults, Amelia didn't rush. She paused, looking around with an open, unjaded curiosity that was rare to behold. As Mr. Vance impatiently gestured for her to hurry, Amelia's gaze landed on Art. She didn't avert her eyes. She didn't quicken her step. She just looked, her brow furrowed slightly, a silent contemplation in her young face. Arthur felt a strange prickle. Most children, influenced by their parents, either ignored him or stared with a wide-eyed, slightly fearful curiosity. But Amelia's gaze held no fear, only a profound, innocent awareness. He was not invisible to her. Not at all. And in that moment, in the cold, indifferent heart of the city, a tiny, unexpected flicker of light had just appeared on Arthur Hayes' horizon. He didn't know it yet, but that innocent gaze would soon unravel a forgotten past, a hidden conspiracy, and drag him from the shadows into the blinding light of an FBI investigation. His days on the concrete bench were numbered. The morning sun, now climbing higher, cast long, distorted shadows across the polished granite of the First National Bank. The incessant hum of the city swelled around Arthur Hayes, a dull roar that had become the soundtrack to his solitary existence. He watched Amelia Vance, the little girl from yesterday, as she stood patiently by the sleek black sedan. Her father, Mr. Vance, already inside the bank, likely embroiled in the frantic pace of the financial world. Unlike the adults who navigated the busy sidewalk with determined, downcast eyes, Amelia's gaze seemed to absorb everything. It was a gaze that didn't just look at him, but seemed to see him. Her small hands clutched a brightly colored lunchbox, adorned with cartoon characters. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other, a child's natural impatience beginning to set in. Her father had disappeared behind the revolving doors, probably telling her to wait just a minute. To Arthur, who had observed their routine for weeks, a minute for Mr. Vance often stretched into 20 or 30. Amelia's eyes, bright and curious, fixed on Arthur again. He felt a familiar tightening in his chest, anticipating the usual averted gaze, the subtle shift of body language that communicated his invisibility. But this time, it didn't come. Instead, her brow furrowed slightly, a ripple of childish concern crossing her face. She looked at his sign, her lips silently mouthing the words, "Veteran, hungry, God bless." Then her gaze drifted to his empty cup and finally settled on his face, where the subtle lines of weariness were permanently etched. Slowly, deliberately, Amelia made her decision. She took a hesitant step towards him, then another. Arthur watched her approach, a strange sense of unease and wonder washing over him. It was a rare, almost unheard of occurrence for anyone to willingly break the invisible barrier between him and the bustling world. She stopped a few feet away, her small face earnest. She clutched her lunchbox tighter for a moment, then, with a deep breath, she extended it towards him. "Here," she said, her voice small but clear, cutting through the urban din like a fragile bell. "You can have my lunch." Arthur stared at the lunchbox, then at her outstretched hand, then back at her guileless eyes. He was stunned. In all his years on the streets, enduring countless slights, countless acts of dehumanization, no one had ever offered him food with such simple, unburdened generosity. Not a handout thrown from a passing car, not a hurried gesture from a soup kitchen volunteer, but a child's personal sacrifice, her very own meal. His hardened exterior, built layer by painstaking layer against the relentless assault of indifference, cracked. Are you sure, little one?" he managed to croak, his voice rough with disuse and unexpected emotion. Amelia nodded emphatically, her eyes serious. "My daddy always says it's important to share, and you look very hungry." She pushed the lunchbox closer. "There's a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and an apple and some chips, my favorite." Arthur's hand, trembling slightly, reached out and gently took the lunchbox. The plastic felt surprisingly warm in his cold fingers. "Thank you," he said, the words barely a whisper, thick with a gratitude so profound it felt inadequate. His eyes, usually guarded and weary, met hers, and in that fleeting connection, an entire universe of unspoken thanks passed between them. It was a silent conversation, a moment of pure, unadulterated human connection in the heart of a cold, impersonal city. He saw her innocence, her simple compassion. She saw his dignity, his genuine appreciation. Unbeknownst to Arthur and Amelia, their small, profound interaction was not unseen. High above them, in a tinted window on the third floor of the First National Bank, a pair of binoculars was silently lowered. Silas, a man whose face was as impassive as stone, and whose eyes held the cold, calculating glint of a predator, clicked a button on a small recording device. He had been meticulously monitoring Arthur for weeks, a silent, unseen shadow. He had orders to track, not to engage. But this was an unexpected variable. Silas's lips thinned into a grim line. The target, subject, Hayes, Arthur, code Raven, was supposed to remain isolated, unnoticed. This interaction, a child's unsolicited act of charity, complicated everything. It made Hayes visible. It made him vulnerable, and by extension, a liability. Silas immediately pulled out a burner phone, its screen dark, and punched in a coded number. His voice, when he spoke, was low, clipped, and devoid of emotion. Confirmed. Deviation from protocol. Contact with minor. High-risk exposure. Advise immediate extraction. He listened for a moment, then simply said, "Understood. Initiating Phase 2. He replaced the binoculars, his gaze sweeping over the scene one last time before he melted back into the shadows of the executive floor. His presence was subtly menacing, a silent promise of impending danger. Unaware of the chilling observation, Arthur carefully opened the lunchbox. The simple peanut butter and jelly sandwich, wrapped in wax paper, looked like a feast. He unwrapped it slowly, savoring the familiar, comforting aroma. He took a bite, then another. The soft bread, the sweet jam, the creamy peanut butter melting on his tongue. It was the best meal he had tasted in months, not just for its taste, but for the profound humanity with which it was delivered. He ate slowly, deliberately, his hunger a deep, satisfied hum. Amelia watched him, a small, genuine smile blooming on her face, a simple joy radiating from her. Just then, the bank's revolving doors whirred, and Mr. Vance emerged, briefcase in hand, his face already softening as he spotted Amelia. "Amelia, darling, I'm so sorry. That meeting ran over. Are you ready to go?" He glanced at Arthur, a flicker of recognition, then a polite, slightly embarrassed smile. He had seen Arthur before, like many others, as part of the streetscape, an unfortunate but distant reality. He saw the empty lunchbox in Amelia's hand, then noticed Arthur eating. His smile widened, a touch of warmth entering his eyes. "Well, that was very kind of you, sweetheart," he said to Amelia, patting her head. He didn't offer money, simply acknowledging his daughter's good heart, completely oblivious to the unseen observer and the chain of events that had just been set into motion. He simply thought it was a small act of charity, nothing more. Amelia, beaming, skipped over to her father. "He was so hungry, Daddy," she whispered, a secret shared. As they walked away, Arthur watched them go, a warmth spreading through him that had nothing to do with the sandwich. It was the warmth of being seen, of being acknowledged, of being treated as a human being. The simple act had done more than just fill his stomach. It had touched a forgotten corner of his soul. But unknown to Arthur, the wheels of a much larger, darker machine had just begun to turn. Miles away, in a secure, nondescript office, a red light blinked persistently on a screen. "Target Arthur Hayes. Designated Raven. Confirmed active," a voice stated calmly into a phone. "Interaction with civilian minor detected. Triggering deep dive and asset deployment. Inform Agent Carter of immediate shift in priority." Agent Carter, a lean, focused man with an analytical mind, sat in his stark FBI office, poring over complex financial spreadsheets. His current case involved suspected money laundering and illicit offshore accounts linked to the First National Bank. His investigation had been a meticulous, slow burn, building a case piece by painstaking piece. His phone buzzed. He picked it up. "Carter here," he answered, his voice crisp. "Agent, new development on the First National case. We have an alert. High-level classified asset, subject Raven, has been unexpectedly activated. There was an unsanctioned interaction near the bank. We need you to shift resources. Immediate priority. Locate and secure Raven. He's connected to something much bigger than just a few shady accounts. We believe he's connected to Project Chimera, or at least a highly classified operation we thought was long dead." Carter's brow furrowed. "Raven? Chimera? Sir, I'm running a financial fraud investigation, not a black ops recovery." "Your fraud investigation just got a whole lot more dangerous, Agent. Raven is tied into the bank's deep state operations. His unexpected appearance means someone's made a mistake, and we need to know who. Get your team, now." Agent Carter hung up, a sense of grim realization dawning on him. A simple act of charity, a small girl's kindness, had just unwittingly thrown Arthur Hayes, the quiet veteran on the concrete bench, into the crosshairs of a secret, high-stakes FBI investigation. His life of anonymity, of quiet suffering on the fringes, was now over. The point of no return had been irrevocably crossed, though he was entirely unaware of the storm rapidly brewing on his horizon. He was no longer just a hungry veteran. He was a key, an unwitting pawn in a game he didn't even know he was playing. The hunt had begun. The warmth from Amelia's sandwich lingered in Arthur's stomach, a comforting, unfamiliar sensation. Yet, an unsettling shift had occurred, a subtle disturbance in the otherwise predictable rhythm of his days. A prickling sensation, like static electricity, clung to the periphery of his senses. He tried to dismiss it as residual hunger pangs or the lingering effects of exhaustion, but his military instincts, dormant for so long, stirred restlessly beneath the surface. He felt watched. He meticulously scanned the bustling street, his gaze sharp and methodical, searching for any anomaly. A parked van with tinted windows, a figure lingering too long by a lamppost, an unusual pattern in the crowd's flow. Nothing overtly suspicious. Yet the feeling persisted, a cold knot tightening in his gut. It was a sensation he hadn't felt since a lifetime ago, a life he could barely recall. That night, Huddled beneath a flimsy tarp in a secluded alleyway he called his temporary home, sleep offered no escape. His mind, usually dulled by exhaustion, now raced, caught in a swirling vortex of fragmented memories. He was back there, in a place of blinding light and deafening noise, flashes of desert sand, hot and gritty against his face, the metallic tang of blood in his mouth. A voice, calm but urgent, repeating a sequence of numbers, a code. The chilling silhouette of a man, familiar yet terrifying, standing over him, a cold, calculating gaze. A searing pain in his temple, then darkness. And a name. A fragmented whisper. Raven. Arthur bolted upright, gasping for air, the phantom pain in his head throbbing. Raven, he mumbled, the word strange on his tongue. It wasn't his name, not his name, but it was his. A code. A designation. He clutched his head, trying to anchor the fleeting images, but they slipped away like smoke, leaving only a profound sense of disorientation and dread. He remembered specialized training, rigorous and brutal, a life dedicated to precision and stealth. He remembered a mission, a critical operation, and then nothing but the fragmented chaos that brought him to this forgotten alley. His hidden talent was not just situational awareness. It was the honed instinct of a highly trained operative, a ghost of a past life, now flickering back to life. Meanwhile, high above the city, in a luxurious climate-controlled office overlooking the skyline, the orchestrator of Arthur's past and present predicament calmly sipped aged scotch. Mr. Alistair Thorne, a man whose power within the First National Bank was as vast as it was shadowy, was a study in controlled menace. In his late 50s, impeccably dressed in custom-tailored suits, with silver hair meticulously slicked back and eyes that missed nothing, Thorne exuded an aura of ruthless efficiency. He was the quintessential Type A villain, motivated by insatiable greed and an unquenchable thirst for power. For years, he had skillfully used the bank's legitimate operations as a front for a vast network of illicit activities, money laundering, sanction busting, and even intelligence peddling. He maintained his position through a combination of brilliant financial maneuvering, subtle blackmail, and ruthless elimination of any obstacles. Seated across from him, impassive and coiled, was Silas. Silas was Thorne's shadow, his chief enforcer, a man whose past was as murky as his methods were brutal. A former special operations soldier, discharged under mysterious circumstances, Silas had found his true calling in the illicit world, where his formidable skills in tracking, infiltration, and silent neutralization were highly valued. He was the one who had observed Art and Amelia, the one who had made the call. His Type B villainy was rooted in a cold, professional detachment, an utter lack of remorse or moral compass. So, Raven still draws breath, Thorne mused, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. His voice was smooth, almost silken, but with an underlying current of steel. And now he's making friends with children, pathetic and dangerous. Silas nodded. The intel was clear, sir. He was supposed to be a non-factor, a broken asset, lost to the system. Indeed, a loose end we thought was neatly tied off years ago. The memory wipe was supposed to be complete. But that little girl, she saw something. She recognized something, even if subconsciously. And now, he's a potential breach. Our operations cannot afford a single vulnerability, Silas. Not with the current acquisition. Thorne's eyes, cold as glaciers, fixed on Silas. Locate him, discreetly. Bring him in. We need to know what he remembers, and then he needs to be permanently deactivated. Silas merely inclined his head. Understood, sir. Initiating contact. That very evening, as dusk painted the sky in shades of bruised purple, Arthur returned to his usual spot near the bank. The concrete bench felt different now, charged with an invisible current. He felt it, the subtle shift in air, the unnerving silence of a street that should have been bustling. His instincts screamed danger. He saw the unassuming black sedan parked down the block, its engine running too quietly. He noticed the two men lingering near the alley entrance he usually used for cover, their postures too stiff, their casual conversation too forced. They weren't ordinary loiterers. They were hunters. A sudden, sharp tug on his awareness. a glint of metal from the sedan's side mirror. Too bright. He knew that glare. It was a reflection of a long-range scope. He was being targeted. Without a second thought, Arthur abandoned his sign and cup. His body moved with a forgotten fluidity, a muscle memory buried deep beneath years of neglect. He ducked under the sparse foliage of a decorative bush, rolling, then scrambling over a low wrought iron fence that bordered a forgotten delivery alleyway. His movements were swift, silent, economical. He heard the muffled shouts, the crunch of footsteps behind him as the two men broke cover. They were Thorne's men, no doubt. "Subject is on the move," he heard one of them bark into a comms device. "He's fast, heading into the old service tunnels." Arthur plunged into the labyrinthine darkness of the narrow, refuse-strewn alley. The stench of garbage and damp concrete filled his nostrils, but his mind was clear, focused solely on evasion. He pressed himself against a cold brick wall, listening. Footsteps, heavy and hurried, echoed nearby. He knew these alleys. He'd charted them out of sheer boredom, a survival habit. He remembered a rusted fire escape, a hidden grate leading to the bank's old, disused service tunnels. A desperate gamble. He scaled the fire escape with surprising agility, his fingers finding purchase on the cold, greasy rungs. Below, a powerful flashlight beam cut through the gloom, sweeping the alley. He heard a frustrated curse. He reached the grate, a heavy, rusted iron cover, and with a grunt, leveraged it open. He slipped inside, the darkness welcoming, the grate clanging shut behind him. He landed softly on a dirt floor, the air thick with the smell of damp earth and stale air. He was in. The old service tunnels, a forgotten artery beneath the bustling city. He moved silently through the oppressive darkness, his military training now fully reawakened. Every sense heightened. He wasn't just a veteran begging for food anymore. He was Raven, the highly skilled operative on the run, a dangerous secret festering in the back of his mind. He didn't know what he knew, but he knew enough to be a threat. The desperate chase through the city's underbelly was his initiation, forcing him to confront the reality that he was being hunted, no longer by the specters of his past, but by very real, very dangerous forces. The simple act of kindness from a little girl had not only made him visible, but it had ignited a fuse, transforming him from a forgotten man into a hunted target. His life of anonymity was truly over. The stale, metallic air of the old service tunnels was a grim welcome, but to Arthur, it was a sanctuary. He moved through the subterranean labyrinth with a precision that startled even himself, his memory, long clouded by trauma and neglect, now sharpening under the duress of the chase. He remembered the layout, the intersecting pipes, the disused maintenance rooms, the emergency exits that led to unexpected parts of the city. His senses, dulled by years of the street, were now acutely alive. The scuttling of rats, the drip of water, the distant, muffled rumble of subway trains. He was Raven, a ghost reanimated, and the city's forgotten underbelly was his hunting ground once more. Above ground, the two operatives, Thorne's enforcers, cursed loudly as they realized their target had slipped into the tunnels. Silas, however, remained chillingly calm. He knew Art's profile, even if he didn't know the specifics of his past mission. He knew Raven was a highly trained operative, not just some homeless veteran. "He'll resurface," Silas muttered into his comms. "He always does. Find his usual haunts, stake out his known associates, and check the public transit hubs. He'll want distance." Arthur, however, wasn't thinking about distance. He was thinking about information. The fragmented memories that had haunted his dreams now coalesced into a disturbing picture. Not the full picture, but enough to know he was tied to something far bigger than himself, something insidious unfolding within the very walls of the First National Bank. He remembered a specific file, a coded access point, a name whispered in the dark, Project Chimera. And he remembered a location, a secure server room on an upper floor of the bank, hidden behind layers of biometric and digital security. He emerged from a grimy manhole cover in a less trafficked industrial area miles from the bank, his clothes stained, his face streaked with dirt, but his eyes alight with a grim determination. He was no longer running aimlessly. He was running towards something. He needed to confirm his fragmented memories. He needed answers. Meanwhile, a different kind of hunt was underway. Agent David Carter sat hunched over his desk at the FBI field office, a map of the city spread before him, pushpins marking known homeless encampments and the vicinity of First National Bank. The Raven Directive had jolted his money laundering investigation into an entirely new, deeply unsettling direction. He was a dedicated by-the-book agent, known for his meticulousness and unwavering pursuit of justice. His initial assessment of Arthur Hayes was that of a potential witness, perhaps even a victim, of the bank's shadowy dealings. But the classified intel from his superiors painted a different picture. A highly trained operative gone rogue, or worse, a double agent. Carter, however, trusted data over assumptions. He felt something was off. The official narrative didn't quite fit the profile of the man seen begging on the street. "Team," Carter addressed his small unit, his voice clipped. "Forget the offshore accounts for a moment. Our priority is Arthur Hayes, codename Raven. Intel suggests he's connected to a highly classified operation called Chimera that we believed was dormant. He was observed interacting with a civilian near First National Bank yesterday, an event that triggered this alert. We need to find him, discreetly. No public alarm. He could be a victim, a witness, or a direct threat. Proceed with caution." His agents fanned out, following leads, checking shelters, soup kitchens, and forgotten corners of the city, their pursuit methodical and efficient, a silent net slowly closing around Art. As Art navigated the unfamiliar streets, relying on instinct and a surprising recall of the city's hidden passages, more fragments of his past resurfaced. He recalled training exercises, intricate infiltration techniques, the faces of comrades long forgotten. He remembered his uncanny ability to blend into any environment, to become truly invisible. It was a cruel irony that this very skill had led him to his current existence, a victim of his own mastery of blending. He found himself humming that complex classical tune again, a cello concerto, its notes weaving through his fractured memories, a melody from a world he had once inhabited. He made his way to a public library, seeking the anonymity of its quiet corners. He needed to access a computer to search for clues about Project Chimera, about First National Bank's deeper involvement, but he was broke. He couldn't even afford the small fee for computer access. Frustration gnawed at him. He was a ghost in the system, utterly without resources. Just as despair threatened to overwhelm him, a familiar figure emerged from the library's main entrance, Mr. Vance, Amelia's father. He looked harried, his tie slightly askew, his face drawn. He was talking animatedly on his phone, clearly agitated. "No, Thorne, I don't care about the quarterly reports right now. There's something wrong, I tell you. Discrepancies in the Vanguard accounts, funds moving to untraceable offshore entities. It smells rotten, Alistair. Rotten." He paced back and forth, oblivious to Art's presence, his voice rising in frustration. Arthur froze. Thorne. The name clicked, connecting the current bank executive to the shadowy figure from his fragmented memories, the man who had been overseeing his past mission, the one whose cold eyes had haunted his dreams. Mr. Vance was clearly worried about something deeply wrong within the bank. This was more than just money laundering. It was a conspiracy, just as Art suspected. As Mr. Vance walked past him, still muttering into his phone, his briefcase momentarily swung open. A small, crumpled piece of paper fluttered out, unnoticed by the distracted executive. It landed precisely at Art's feet. Art hesitated, then quickly picked it up. It was a receipt for a coffee, but on the back, hastily scrawled, was a series of alphanumeric characters, followed by a time and a date. B2723 tomorrow. Below it, almost too faint to read, was a barely legible address, a dilapidated warehouse on the city's docks. Arthur stared at the note, his mind racing. It was clearly a code, a meeting point perhaps. Was it for Mr. Vance? Or was it some internal bank code? The warehouse address was known for illicit activities, a common drop-off point for contraband. It felt like a trap, but also a lead, an unexpected lifeline. He looked up, but Mr. Vance had already disappeared into a waiting taxi. Art was on his own again, with a cryptic message and a growing certainty that Mr. Vance, unknowingly, had become his unexpected ally. Mr. Vance's save the cat moment was not a conscious act of helping Art, but an inadvertent leak of information driven by his own growing suspicions about the true nature of Thorne's operations. He was a good man, clearly troubled by the corruption he was uncovering within his own company. The gauntlet was now thrown. Art knew he was being hunted by Thorne's operatives, but now he also knew the FBI was on his trail. He was caught between two powerful opposing forces, a lone wolf with a fragmented memory and a piece of paper that might hold the key to everything. Thorne, growing impatient, escalated his tactics. Flyers, discreet but insistent, began to appear in the city's underbelly, offering a substantial reward for information leading to Arthur Hayes. The message was clear. They wanted him found, and they didn't care who found him. The pressure intensified. Arthur had to make a choice: continue running, or confront the shadows of his past, whatever they might reveal. He looked at the receipt, the cryptic coordinates a beacon in the encroaching twilight. He had a destination, a purpose. He would go to that warehouse. He would find out what Project Chimera was. He would reclaim his identity. He had to. For the little girl who had seen him, for the scattered pieces of his memory, and for the justice that was long overdue. The stakes were higher than ever, and Art, the once invisible man, was about to step into the heart of the storm. The dilapidated warehouse at the docks, shrouded in the humid embrace of the pre-dawn mist, felt like the maw of a beast. Its skeletal frame, rusted and decaying, loomed against the bruised sky, a monument to forgotten industry. But to Arthur, it was the focal point of his fractured past and his perilous present. The cryptic note from Mr. Vance, B2723 wide tomorrow, and the warehouse address, had led him here, an unwitting beacon in the darkness. He knew the time was fast approaching. The digital clock on a distant illuminated billboard flashed 22:47. He approached cautiously, his senses alive, every shadow a potential threat. The hum of the city was muted here, replaced by the rhythmic sloshing of unseen water against pilings and the mournful cries of gulls. The air tasted of salt, rust, and something else, a faint, metallic tang that spoke of hidden activities. This was Thorne's hunting ground, and Art was walking directly into the trap. But he had to. The fragmented memories of Project Chimera gnawed at him, demanding answers. He used the cover of stacked crates and discarded tarps, moving with the silent, predatory grace that was his true nature. His eyes, now fully accustomed to the low light, scanned for tripwires, for infrared beams, for the glint of a hidden camera lens. Years of homelessness had sharpened his observational skills, turning him into a master of the urban landscape. But it was his military training that truly guided him now. He remembered the specific entry sequence for secure facilities, the subtle pressure points on heavy doors, the blind spots in perimeter defenses. Inside the sprawling warehouse, a single bare bulb hung suspended from the ceiling, casting a sickly yellow glow on the scene below. Alistair Thorne stood at a makeshift table, his elegant suit incongruous against the grimy backdrop. Beside him, coolly efficient, was Silas. On the table, glowing ominously, was a portable server unit, its intricate wires snaking towards a laptop. Thorne was meticulously deleting files, his fingers moving with swift, practiced ease. "Almost done, Silas," Thorne murmured, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. "Project Chimera, all its digital traces, gone. Our new acquisition in the Cayman Islands will be untraceable. And as for our little ghost, Raven, he won't find a single shred of evidence here." Silas nodded, his eyes fixed on the warehouse entrance. "He'll be here, sir. He's predictable in his pursuit of truth, just as we anticipated." Arthur, hidden high above in the shadowed rafters, felt a cold dread creep through him. Project Chimera. The name echoed the fragmented memory, and now he understood. It wasn't just money laundering. It was a deep state operation, leveraging the bank's vast financial network for illicit, perhaps even treasonous activities. He watched Thorne delete files, a chilling realization dawning on him. The crucial evidence, the very thing he'd risked everything for, was being erased right before his eyes. He had to act. Now. This was Art's breath-holding moment. He was isolated, outmatched, facing two highly dangerous men. He could stay hidden, wait for an opportunity, but the evidence would be gone. He had no backup, no weapons, only his wits and the reawakened skills of a forgotten life. He felt the weight of his years on the street, the hunger, the weariness. But beneath it, a surge of adrenaline, a primal force he hadn't known he possessed, roared to life. He remembered a specific infiltration technique, a stealth maneuver, a way to create a distraction. He spotted a loose, rusted chain hanging near a series of old, disused pulleys directly above Thorn. It was a long shot, but it was his only chance. He took a deep breath, calculated the trajectory, and silently, swiftly, swung across the rafters. As he reached the chain, he released a strategically placed, small, heavy metal object he'd picked up in the tunnels. It landed with a loud clang on a loose piece of sheet metal below, echoing loudly in the cavernous space. Thorn and Silas reacted instantly, their heads snapping towards the sound, hands instinctively going to concealed weapons. It was all the distraction Art needed. In that split second, he dropped silently from the rafters, landing with a soft thud behind a stack of crates, unseen. "What was that?" Thorn barked, his calm shattered. "Silas, check it!" Silas, ever cautious, drew a silenced pistol and moved towards the sound, his senses alert. This was not a random noise. As Silas investigated, Art moved with blurring speed. He bypassed Thorn, who was momentarily distracted, and lunged for the server unit. Thorn, turning back, gasped in alarm. "Raven, how?" Art ignored him, his fingers flying across the laptop's keyboard. He needed a specific file, a backup protocol he suddenly remembered from his Chimera training, a back door. He had precious seconds before Silas returned. The air outside the warehouse shimmered with the silent tension of a tightening noose. Agent Carter stood beside a nondescript black van, observing the scene through high-tech binoculars. His team was in position, surrounding the warehouse, disguised as dock workers and late-night truckers. They had tracked Thorn to this location, based on a series of encrypted communications they'd intercepted, part of Carter's original money laundering investigation. The Raven alert had now converged with his existing case, putting Art Hayes, the homeless veteran, at the very heart of a major federal operation. "Team, hold positions," Carter commanded into his comms. "We have multiple individuals inside. Looks like Thorn and at least one other, and I'm getting an irregular heat signature, possibly Hayes. I need confirmation on that server unit. It could be their data wipe." Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from within the warehouse. A burst of muffled shouts. Carter's eyes narrowed. "Something's happening. Ready to move. On my mark." Inside, Art had managed to execute a rapid data transfer, copying the critical files to a small, encrypted drive he'd managed to find in a discarded piece of electronics. He just needed to upload them to a secure server, a task he couldn't do from here. Thorn, enraged, lunged at him, a letter opener glinting in his hand. "You meddling fool! You'll never get away with this!" Thorn shrieked, his composure crumbling, revealing the desperate villain beneath the veneer of corporate power. Art dodged, his movements fluid and precise. He didn't engage in a prolonged fight. His goal was the data, not a brawl. But just as he turned to escape, Silas reappeared, his face a mask of cold fury, his pistol raised. "Hold it, Raven," Silas snarled, his voice deadly. "It's over." Art found himself cornered, the vastness of the warehouse suddenly suffocating. Thorn was behind him, Silas in front. He was outmatched, no weapons, weakened by years on the street. This was it, the culmination of everything. The memories, the chase, the desperation. He closed his eyes for a split second, a fleeting image of Amelia's innocent face flashing in his mind. Then, a sudden, almost instinctual surge of clarity. His mind, under extreme pressure, accessed a forgotten part of his training. He wasn't just a combat operative. He was also trained in environmental manipulation, using the surroundings to his advantage. He noticed a series of interlocking floor panels beneath Silas, weakened by years of damp and neglect. With a desperate burst of energy, Art feigned a lunge towards Silas, drawing his attention. Then, with a lightning-fast kick, he slammed his foot down on the weakest point of the old floor panel. The wood groaned, then cracked, sending Silas stumbling backward, off balance. As Silas tried to regain his footing, Art saw his chance. He rolled, grabbing a discarded piece of jagged metal, a broken strut, and used it to leverage himself forward, smashing it into the side of Thorn's laptop, sending sparks flying and the server unit crashing to the concrete floor. The data wipe was interrupted. The evidence was still there, physically damaged but intact. A cacophony erupted. Alarms blared, triggered by the destruction of the server. Outside, Agent Carter heard the alarms. "Go! Go! Go!" he yelled, and his team burst into the warehouse, weapons drawn, flashlights cutting through the gloom. Thorne roared in frustration, seeing his precious files destroyed. Silas, recovering, raised his pistol, aiming for Art. But a laser sight, red and precise, settled on Silas's chest from the entrance. "FBI, drop your weapon!" Agent Carter's voice boomed, authoritative and unwavering. Silas hesitated for a split second, then grimaced, dropping his gun. Thorne, seeing the overwhelming force, threw his hands up in despair, his face contorting into a mask of pure defeat. Arthur, panting, slumped against a stack of crates, the small, encrypted drive clutched tightly in his hand. He looked at Thorne, then at Silas, then finally at Agent Carter. The storm had converged. He had faced the ultimate test, and he had survived. The Invisible Man was invisible no longer. The warehouse, once a silent arena for clandestine operations, now buzzed with the efficient, methodical energy of an FBI raid. Agent Carter's team swarmed the space, securing the perimeter, documenting the scene, and collecting the scattered evidence. Alistair Thorne, his face pale with a mixture of fury and despair, was unceremoniously handcuffed, his protests about his executive status falling on deaf ears. Silas, grim-faced but compliant, was also taken into custody, his cold professionalism unable to withstand the overwhelming force of the law. Arthur, still clutching the damaged encrypted drive, watched it all unfold from his slumped position against the crates. The adrenaline that had propelled him through the ordeal slowly receded, leaving behind a profound exhaustion. Agent Carter, his gaze sharp and assessing, approached him. He knelt down, his eyes meeting Art's. "Arthur Hayes?" Carter's voice was calm, authoritative. Art nodded, his throat dry. "That's me. Agent David Carter, FBI," he introduced himself, flashing his badge. "That drive you're holding, is that the data Thorne was trying to erase?" Art pushed the drive forward, his fingers unclenching. "Project Chimera, Bank's deep state operations. It's all there. Or what's left of it." Carter carefully took the drive. His eyes, usually fixed on the intricacies of financial crime, now held a new understanding. He had seen the raw skill with which Art had evaded capture, the desperation in Thorne's eyes, the sheer danger of Silas. The pieces were starting to fit, painting a picture far more complex than a simple financial fraud. "You were part of Chimera, weren't you, Mr. Hayes?" Carter asked, his voice softer now. "A Black Ops asset. That's why they tracked you, why they tried to silence you." Art's gaze drifted to the now cuffed Thorne, his face a mask of rage and defeat. They tried to erase me. Memory wipe. Left me for dead in a foreign country. Thought I was a broken asset." His voice was rough, scarred by years of disuse and pain. They didn't want any loose ends connected to what they were really doing here. Carter nodded slowly, a deep respect dawning in his eyes. He had read the classified reports on Project Chimera, a shadowy, highly illegal intelligence operation funded through illicit means, using a major financial institution as its cover. He had initially seen Art as a potential suspect, a rogue element. Now he saw a victim, a patriot discarded and betrayed. "We'll get you answers, Mr. Hayes, and justice." The next few hours were a blur of debriefings in a sterile FBI interrogation room. Art recounted his fragmented memories, the training, the mission, the betrayal, and the brutal memory wipe that had left him adrift and amnesiac. He spoke of the specific file structures, the code names, the secret channels he remembered from his training, all of which aligned perfectly with the data recovered from Thorne's damaged server and the intercepts Carter's team already had. The jigsaw puzzle of the conspiracy rapidly clicked into place. The evidence was overwhelming. Thorne's illicit empire at the First National Bank was a sprawling web of money laundering, sanctions evasion, and, most damningly, the illegal funding of foreign black operations under the umbrella of Project Chimera. He had used the bank's vast resources to finance illegal arms deals, manipulate international markets for personal gain, and even facilitate intelligence operations for rogue states, all while siphoning billions into his own offshore accounts. Art's testimony, combined with the recovered data, provided the conclusive links. Silas, a former Black Ops soldier himself, confirmed parts of the story, his professional loyalty shifting when faced with undeniable proof and the promise of a lighter sentence. The downfall of Alistair Thorne was swift and public. News broke like a tidal wave across national media. Bank executive arrested in massive money laundering and Black Ops scandal. The headlines screamed, adorned with Thorne's grim-faced mugshot. The First National Bank, once a symbol of stability, plummeted into crisis, its stock crashing, its reputation in tatters. Investigations were launched into its board and higher executives. Thorne faced a litany of charges: conspiracy, fraud, money laundering, and treason. He was denied bail, his empire crumbled, and his carefully constructed life of power and prestige evaporated into thin air. Justice, slow and methodical, was finally being served. Silas, for his cooperation, received a significantly reduced sentence, but his career as a ruthless operative was over. Meanwhile, Arthur Hayes was no longer the homeless veteran. His record was cleared. The FBI provided him with immediate medical attention, a clean change of clothes, and a warm meal. Not a sandwich from a child, but a proper, nourishing meal. Psychological support was offered, and he gratefully accepted. The years of trauma and homelessness had left scars, but the journey towards healing had begun. Agent Carter visited him in the quiet, temporary apartment the FBI had arranged. "Mr. Hayes," Carter began, a genuine respect in his voice. "On behalf of the Bureau, and personally, I want to apologize. For the oversight, for what was done to you, and for our initial assumptions. You're a hero, Mr. Hayes. You brought down a major criminal enterprise." Art looked at him, his gaze steady. "I was just trying to survive, Agent. And then a little girl gave me her lunch." He paused, a faint smile touching his lips. "She saw me. And it changed everything." "Indeed," Carter replied, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Funny how the smallest acts can trigger the biggest consequences." He offered Art a discreet card. "My personal number. When you're ready, if you need anything, or just want to talk. And the Bureau would be interested in consulting with you if you're ever open to it. Your skills, Mr. Hayes, are still very much unique." Later that day, feeling stronger, Arthur requested a private meeting. He wanted to see Amelia Vance. He found her at a local park, playing on the swings, her father watching nearby, looking visibly more relaxed than Art had ever seen him. Mr. Vance, having witnessed Thorne's downfall from the inside, had provided crucial internal information to the FBI, collaborating quietly with Agent Carter. His conscience, once troubled, was now clear. He rushed over to Art, his hand extended. "Mr. Hayes, it's truly an honor. I can't apologize enough for everything you went through, and for my indirect involvement in that whole Thorne mess." He looked genuinely contrite. "You're a brave man." "You did the right thing, Mr. Vance," Art said, shaking his hand firmly. "You had the courage to expose the truth." Then Amelia ran up, her eyes wide with curiosity. She recognized Art instantly, a flicker of surprise, then delight. "You're the man from the bank," she exclaimed, her voice bright. "Did you like my sandwich?" Art knelt down, meeting her at eye level. He looked into her innocent, kind eyes, the eyes that had seen beyond his ragged clothes, beyond his sign. "Amelia," he said, his voice husky with emotion. "Your sandwich. It was the best meal I've ever had. And your kindness. It saved my life. You saw me when no one else did. You started all of this." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, intricately carved wooden bird, a tiny sparrow. He had found it years ago, a forgotten child's toy, and meticulously cleaned and kept it. It was his only possession that held pure, unblemished beauty. "This is for you," he said, placing it gently in her small palm. "A symbol. For seeing the invisible. For your kindness." Amelia's eyes lit up. She clutched the bird, beaming. "Thank you. He's beautiful." As she skipped away to show her father, Art watched her, a profound sense of peace settling over him. He was no longer the invisible man begging for food. He was Arthur Hayes, a man who had faced the abyss and returned, his dignity restored, his purpose beginning to re-emerge. The silent act of a little girl's compassion had sparked an FBI investigation. Yes, but more importantly, it had sparked a life. The new calm had arrived, ushering in the quiet promise of a second chance. 3 years later, the harsh, indifferent concrete of the city had softened for Arthur Hayes, replaced by the quiet comfort of a small, meticulously kept craftsman house on the outskirts of the city. The garden, once a tangle of weeds, now bloomed with vibrant hydrangeas and fragrant roses, a testament to his newfound peace and purposeful labor. He no longer woke to the rumble of distant traffic, but to the gentle chirping of birds and the subtle aroma of brewing coffee. The gnawing ache of hunger had been replaced by the comforting rhythm of regular meals, cooked in his own small but efficient kitchen. Arthur wasn't rich, not in the way Alistair Thorne had been, but he was wealthy in ways that truly mattered. He had his dignity, his purpose, and a profound sense of gratitude that hummed beneath the surface of his everyday life. He spent his mornings working part-time as a security consultant for a nonprofit, leveraging his extraordinary observational skills and tactical knowledge to help vulnerable communities identify and address potential threats. It was quiet work, off the books, utilizing his unique talents for good, ensuring the shadows he once inhabited now served as a shield for others. His true passion, however, lay in the project that blossomed from the seed of Amelia's kindness. Inspired by that single sandwich and the crushing invisibility he had endured, Arthur established the Sparrow's Nest, a non-profit foundation dedicated to helping homeless veterans reintegrate into society. Funded by a modest settlement from the FBI's investigation into Thorne's vast illicit assets, and bolstered by generous donations from grateful citizens and ethical businesses like Mr. Vance's restructured First National Bank, the Sparrow's Nest provided more than just shelter. It offered comprehensive support, job training programs, mental health counseling, addiction recovery services, and most importantly, a sense of community and belonging. Arthur insisted on a hands-on approach. He often greeted new arrivals at the Sparrow's Nest himself, his eyes, no longer weary but clear and empathetic, offering a silent understanding. He taught basic life skills classes, shared stories of his own journey, and simply listened, offering a safe space for veterans to unburden themselves. He ensured that every veteran who walked through their doors felt seen, valued, and empowered to rebuild their lives. His own experiences made him uniquely qualified, a living testament to the possibility of redemption. He had become a quiet advocate, his powerful story, though never sensationalized, resonating deeply with those he sought to help. He kept in touch with Agent Carter, who had become a trusted confidant. Carter, now promoted, occasionally consulted Arthur on complex cases, recognizing the depth of his analytical mind. Their relationship was one of mutual respect, a silent acknowledgement of the unconventional path that had brought them together. And Amelia Vance? Now 11 years old, she was a bright, compassionate girl, growing into a thoughtful young woman. Her bond with Arthur remained a unique and enduring one. She still visited him at the Sparrow's Nest, often bringing homemade cookies or small drawings. She'd sit on the porch swing with him, listening intently as he recounted stories of the veterans he was helping, her eyes alight with understanding. She saw, firsthand, the tangible ripple effect of her childhood kindness, realizing the profound power of a simple, selfless act. The wooden sparrow he had given her sat proudly on her desk, a constant reminder of the day she truly saw someone. Alistair Thorne's fate, by contrast, was a stark lesson in the ultimate cost of unchecked greed and hubris. Convicted on multiple counts of conspiracy, fraud, and treason, he received a life sentence without parole. His vast fortune was seized, his name synonymous with corporate malfeasance. The once imposing First National Bank underwent a complete restructuring, with Mr. Vance leading the charge to restore its integrity, purging the corruption that Thorne had woven into its very fabric. Thorne faded into obscurity, a bitter, broken man, his legacy one of shame and disgrace, a complete and total fall from grace, leaving behind nothing but ruin. He would die in prison, a forgotten name. One crisp autumn afternoon, Arthur stood outside the Sparrow's Nest, watching a group of veterans, some with visible scars, others with unseen wounds, laughing as they tended to a small community garden they had built. The setting sun cast a golden glow over their faces, illuminating newfound hope. Amelia arrived, holding a fresh batch of peanut butter cookies, a familiar scent that brought a warm smile to Art's face. "These smell amazing, Amelia," he said, taking one. My grandma's recipe, she beamed, just like the one I gave you. Arthur looked at the cookie, then at the bustling, vibrant scene around him. He thought of that cold morning, the concrete bench, the biting hunger, the crushing invisibility. He thought of the desperate gamble, the chase, the fear. And then he remembered Amelia's small hand, outstretched, offering a simple sandwich, igniting a spark that had led to an FBI investigation. Yes, but ultimately to a second chance. He turned to Amelia, his eyes filled with profound gratitude. "You know," he said softly, "that sandwich, that day, it wasn't just lunch, it was everything. It reminded me that even in the darkest places, light can find a path. It reminded me that courage can alter destinies. You reminded me that unseen heroes like you can change the world." He paused, a quiet smile playing on his lips. "And now," he continued, gesturing to the vibrant garden and the laughter echoing from within the sparrow's nest, "because of that sandwich, we get to help other invisible heroes find their way home." The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. Arthur Hayes, no longer the forgotten veteran, stood tall, his hands no longer clutching a sign begging for food, but reaching out to uplift others. His journey from the concrete bench to this haven of hope was a testament to the transformative power of a single act of kindness, a reminder that the seeds of great change are often sown in the most unexpected and humble moments. He had found his peace, his purpose, and a profound sense of belonging, all sparked by a little girl's lunch. If this story stirred your heart, if it reminds you that courage can alter destinies and that light always finds a path even in the deepest darkness, please leave a comment. Share this story with those who need inspiration. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell to never miss our upcoming narratives that delve into the profound human spirit and the power of unseen heroes. Thank you for joining our journey.